Right, welcome to another episode of Mulling in His Own Stupidity with me, Dave Mullen. The show where I try to find answers amongst the chaos and uncertainty of the modern world, all the while mulling in my own stupidity. What have I been mulling over this week? Well, wouldn't you like to know? This week I've been mulling over using my phone less. I know what you're thinking, another video telling me to put my phone down, uploaded onto YouTube, a medium almost exclusively accessed via the mobile telephone. Oh, the hypocrisy. It is a little rich telling people to put their phones down while definitely hoping they'll use their phones to watch this very video in which I'm telling them to put their phones down. But hear me out. Personally, I quite like videos that talk about the benefits of using your phone less or the harmful impacts of using your phone a bit too much, because normally when I finish watching them, I'll put my phone down. Maybe even switch it off for a bit, which makes a change from when I'm watching literally any other video online, during which I'm scrolling through the suggested videos trying to find something to watch next. And when I'm watching that, I'm scrolling through the suggested videos trying to find something to watch next. And when I'm watching that, I'm scrolling through the suggested videos trying to find something to watch next. And when I'm watching that, I'm trying to... So to watch a video all the way through and then just put my phone down, especially when you think about the way these apps are designed to make you keep watching video after video, it's actually quite powerful. It's actually quite powerful what I'm doing here. It's actually quite important. So rather than thinking of this as like a beer company telling you to drink responsibly while advertising their juicy, sweet, dripping wet bottle of beer, think about it like a low alcohol beer telling you you can enjoy the taste, but you don't have to keep drinking, get wasted, and feel terrible the next day. You can watch this video, and if it resonates with you, you can give it a try. Put your phone down, switch it off for a bit, see if you experience any of the benefits I talk about. So without further ado, let's get on to the crux of the issue, the meat and potatoes of this video, why I decided to use my phone less and what, if any, impact did it have on me. The why is quite simple. My wife and I were going on our mini-moon. A mini-moon is like a honeymoon, but in a teeny weeny tiny model village. She suggested we use it as an opportunity to have a break from our phones. I thought, sounds like a great idea. I wouldn't say either of us are totally addicted to our phones. Out of the two of us, I'd probably use my phone a little less, but we both try and moderate our phone use by deleting apps like Instagram, using sleep mode, leaving our phones at home. Having said that, while we're not totally addicted, we do rely on our phones quite a lot. We use our phones pretty much every day, multiple times a day. And while that might not seem bad because everyone else does it, not being able to go a whole day without using something might actually be quite bad when you think about it. But anyway, when it came to the mini moon, we both approached it in slightly different ways. I got the bus, she got the train. No, I jest. I simply switched my phone off for the majority of the time we were there. She used airplane mode, so she could still use Google Maps and listen to music, things like that. I'm just going to warn you, what I discovered was not groundbreaking. I didn't become enlightened or have some big epiphany that changed my life forever. I guess I simply noticed a few things. The first thing you realize when you're not using your phone all the time, especially when you're on holiday and you're not going to work or seeing friends really, is that you do end up sitting around staring into space a lot more. You might be thinking, one, why would I want to sit around and stare into space when I could be looking at my phone? And two, wow, sounds amazing. Sitting around staring into space, whoop-de-doo, sign me up. And they're both fair points, well made, well taken, but I suppose it is quite subtle. But you realise when you're sitting around staring into space without a phone in front of your face, that you do notice a lot more in the world around you. The world around you becomes a bit bigger, a bit more interesting, a bit more detailed. For example, one morning when I woke up, I noticed the morning light coming through the curtains and I just looked at it. Another time I was sitting at the coffee table and I noticed there was a pattern of a tree etched into the tabletop, and I thought maybe I wouldn't have noticed that if I had my phone on top of this table and I was looking at that instead. I noticed the sound of the rain outside the window. I noticed the birds singing in the trees. I noticed the rush of the river that went past our hotel. Also, because I wasn't using my phone, if I wanted to find something out, I actually had to go and talk to a human being. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but I actually did it. I went to reception and I asked them things like, was there anywhere I could watch the Liverpool game? Were there any cafes in the village? Could we walk to the local tourist attraction? To which I got the answers no, no, and yes. And while this may all seem trivial, these may seem like small things, imagine it multiplied over your entire life. Imagine how many things you might not notice, how many conversations you might not have because you're using your phone. And they may be small things, maybe like the pattern of a tree in a tabletop, but they might be bigger things like the first smile of your child, or they might just add up to a much bigger thing when multiplied over your entire life. And you never know, one of the people you speak to might turn out to be quite important in your life, and you never would have spoken to them if you'd been using your phone. So something to think about. We were actually on the train setting off on our mini moon, and I overheard a conversation between a mum and her son. She was obviously scrolling through some news website on her phone, and I was obviously feeling massively superior because I decided about an hour ago to go phoneless for the weekend. She, said something like, "Oh, this is terrible. The survey shows that 38% of Americans believe immigration is poisoning their society. Isn't that awful? So scary." Something along those lines. And I don't know. Obviously, I was feeling very smug, but just think about that for a second. She's on the train with her son, and rather than paying attention to him, paying attention to what's happening around them, she's paying attention to people who don't even live in the same country as her, people who she's never met, who she probably never will meet, who've answered questions in a survey she had no part in. And what is that telling her son? On some level, she's broadcasting to him, like, look, this is more important than you. It's more important than us being together on this train right now. And I'm not criticizing her. I'm not saying she's a bad mother. God forbid. But I think it's a good example of what happens, what tends to happen when you have your phone on you all the time. And I know that because we've all done it. We've all been with family members, people who in theory are supposed to be the most important people in our lives. Maybe even extended family who we don't get to see that much. Maybe even on a date night where the whole point is that you pay attention to one person exclusively, and yet we've all done it. We get our phones out and we look at those instead. It's not a problem, in individual cases, but multiplied over many occasions, I think it does potentially start to become a problem. Ian McGilchrist is a boffin, basically. He's a clever guy. He's a doctor. He's a neuroscientist. He wrote a book about the divided brain, about the two hemispheres of the brain. Very interesting. I recommend it if you haven't read it. He's also written a new book, very long, called The Matter with Things, that I'm trying to very slowly make my way through at the moment. And he believes that attention changes the world. What you choose to attend to has an impact on the world around you. And on some level, paying attention is an act of love. We show what we value through our attention. And so if, more often than not, you're paying attention to what's on your phone, then the people around you, who, like I said, tend to be the people who are most important to you, might just start to get the impression, even if it's not consciously, but they might get the impression that you value what's on your phone more than them. I often feel like something comes out of nothing, like if you're sitting around with friends and family or anyone and you're struggling for something to talk about, often if you just sit there, something will come up. Whereas if you're like grasping desperately, trying to think of something to talk about, nothing will come. And it's the same with anything. If you just sit there, something will come to fill that space. Could be something to talk about, could be something to do, it could be a creative impulse. When I woke up on the mini moon, I was looking at the light, a poem started to form in my mind, and I'm pretty sure that wouldn't have happened if I'd immediately grabbed my phone and was looking at that instead. Next time you're with your friends and family and you feel a lull and you feel that urge to grab your phone, maybe just don't. Maybe just sit there and see what comes up. And who knows, it might be better than what you're about to look at on your phone. There's another lady who's a neuroscientist or surgeon, and she had a stroke. She's done some YouTube videos and a TED Talk. She believes in a similar way to Ian McGilchrist, that there's like different parts of the brain, that different modes, different ways of interacting with the world. And one of them is like this ego mind that's always grasping, planning, organizing, thinking ahead. But there are other calmer, more present, more open ways of being in the world. And after her stroke, that ego mind of hers was knocked out of action. And during her recovery, which took 9 years, she had to learn to live without it. And she realized that it was perfectly possible, even preferable, to live without this constant planning, organizing, grasping. And then after 9 years, it came back online. It was like, hey, I'm back. I want to be in control. And she was like, oh, no, you don't. I can use you. You're a great tool, but I don't need you to be in control all the time. And I think that's a great analogy for the way we interact with our phones. Like, they're amazing tools. You can use them to plan, organize, communicate. And yes, there's some great YouTube videos that you can watch. And after you finish watching them, you can like and subscribe and maybe even visit the Patreon page and pay the creators. I mean, it's up to you. And there's some great podcasts and there's great music and there's all these things, but we shouldn't let that fool us into thinking that we need these phones always, to be honest, always in our hands, always dominating what is one of the most precious things we have, and what some people believe is like a fundamental element or building block of the universe, and that is our own attention, our own consciousness. Because if you're always checking your phone, if you've always got your phone in your hand, your attention becomes fragmented. I remember having a conversation with someone at work, really nice guy, got on with him well, but he would often have his phone in his hand. And one time I'm talking to him and he's got his phone in his hand and he's literally having full-blown conversations on WhatsApp while talking to me. I mean, I might not be that interesting to talk to, I don't know, but surely that can't be a good way to interact with anyone. It's not good for you, it's not good for the person you're talking to. And eventually, like, you're going to lose the ability to pay sustained attention to anything if your attention's constantly like divided and fragmented in that way. And if you can't pay sustained attention to anything, you're not going to be able to watch a film, you're not going to be able to follow a TV series, you're not going to be able to read a book, you're not going to be able to have a proper conversation with anyone. In his new book, The Matter with Things, which, like I said, I'm reading quite slowly at the moment, McGilchrist draws parallels between conditions like autism, schizophrenia, and the ways that people think and behave in the modern world. And he has a lot of quotes from patients. One of the quotes from the schizophrenic patient stood out to me because he's talking about how his attention is fragmented, and he said, lots of things grab my attention, but I'm not really interested in anything. And I thought, that kind of sounds familiar. Like, when you're using your phone, lots of things are grabbing your attention. You're kind of held there, but you're not really interested or engaged in anything. It's almost like a state of suspended animation. You're zombified. So in conclusion, if I learned anything from my albeit brief break from my mobile telephone, it was that when you're paying more attention to the world around you, when rather than picking up your phone as soon as there's a lull or a brief pause, you just sit there and yes, stare into space if you have to. Things aren't so much grabbing your attention, you're not flitting from one thing to the next without really being interested in anything. On the contrary, the world around you becomes that little bit more interesting, a bit more detailed, almost more alive, and you realize that there is so much to notice. In short, there's a whole world out there beyond the screen that we so often put in front of our eyes, and you might just be missing out on it. So if you take anything from this video, it would be just to give it a try. Just try one day. Tell your friends and family if you have to, if they'll get worried when you don't instantly reply to their messages, but just try one day without your phone and see what you notice. I've been Dave Mullen, mulling in his own stupidity. Thanks for paying me some attention.